Thanks for coming back to this noon hour panel. When we were discussing this as a curriculum council about what some of the topics could be for this conference, someone, I don't remember who was brought up, but maybe we should talk about how we can best help students. And that's where we'll talk about that later on this afternoon at the 2 o'clock panel. But then, what do we do in terms of giving help for faculty in their own lives, in their stresses that they have in being faculty members and teaching and research and trying to keep up their citizenship as well. And so who should do this? And well, let's have former department chairs do this and administrator. So that's what we did. We called about 500 former department chairs. Only got 3. No, I'm just joking. No, I really appreciate for the agreed to be on this panel. We have Ben Wilson from political science. Who's been about a year since he hasn't been department chair there. Eric, how long has it been since you were department chair?
I was chair from 2010 to 2016.
So about 6 years ago, we finished up in a month. Eric from economics, Mona Hopkins from psychology. How long ago was it? 10 years ago, very, very good. And then Michaela Duper, she's from the Dean's office in sociology, and she's over faculty development. So this is something important in her mind in terms of helping faculty be successful. So what I wanted to do here, some tips and thoughts they have on surviving and succeeding. Share what they've seen is helpful, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So who'd like to go first? You volunteer?
That's no.
So I was trying to think of what I could say that didn't sound like the same old thing, that yes, you're going to be stressed and you have to figure out how to deal with it. Good luck. But as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about, well, stress, maybe we should embrace stress. Stress can be motivating, it can get us in our labs and doing research. I'm not sure it gets everybody writing their papers from the research, but if there's some motivation there. But if you think about it, there are some new studies out on stress that show sort of how you view the stress is how you respond to the stress. And so if you view it as negative, then it's a negative response and you have all the bad physiologic stuff. And if you view it as positive, then you don't have all of those things. It's like it's completely different, even though it can be the same stressor. So embracing stress may be something that we ought to do a little bit. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try to control some of it. But to modify Henry Ford, whether you think stress is positive or you think it's negative, you're right. And so think about it. And then there's a book, Kelly McGonigal has done a lot of work, and she has a book called The Upside of Stress. And it's not that we're just getting rid of stress or we're making stress positive, but it's really about how you think about it and how you perceive it and trying to do some of those things. And then, of course, seeking other kinds of things in your life besides work, which includes relationships and family and making sure that we're being inspired. I had a rough winter semester. I picked up a class for a faculty member that was ill. So I had 3 advanced writing classes with all those papers to read, and it was stressful. And so I tried every day to go onto the BYU site and just find a short, inspiring thing, like, a blurb that somebody said in a devotional. And it was amazing how much that little tiny paragraph really helped. So that was something that I really was much more conscious about doing, because it was incredibly stressful to have 3 writing classes. The other thing to think about is, I know our goal is to strive for perfection in the eternities, not necessarily here. And so I want to give you license to be imperfect. You're going to have a day that you are just overwhelmed. And so maybe that's the day you go for a walk in the woods and, leave it. So it's okay to be imperfect. That doesn't mean we're not striving to improve. but it's okay to not be perfect. And if you think about not being perfect, people that are overly stressed and unhappy often share the same trait because they believe there's something better, they need to be better. And so allowing ourselves to be who we are at that moment and be imperfect is okay. So in thinking about that, you know, ways that you can think about it, we talk about gratitude books and things, you know, things to be grateful for. Well, you know, maybe we should be grateful for ourselves a little bit, that we, you know, did something right today, or we did something nice, or we got through the day. Yay, that was, you know, a big thing for this day. So thinking about things like that. So be imperfect, you're enough where you are right now. Care for yourself, do some emotional first aid. After I graded all my papers and got my grades, and I flew to San Diego and sat out at the beach for a week. Fantastic emotional first aid. Not always can you do that, but do some emotional first aid. And then think about changing your mindset. So make the size of your reaction to the stress fit the stress. So if it's a little stress, have a little reaction. And if you're overreacting, tone down the reaction. If it's a big stress, have a little bit bigger reaction, not a giant reaction. And then think about when the stress is not my problem. So right after Dave, I was chair most of the time when Dave Magleby was dean. And when Dave stepped down, I was still chair for another year. And we were walking across campus, and I can't remember what, you know, new thing came out from the ASB that I was like, what do you think of this? And he looked at me and he said, not my circus, not my monkeys. And that has been a wonderful thing to help me go, I don't need to stress about this. Not my circus, not my monkeys.
Eric, you've got notes, so I guess you can go next.
All right. So as I was thinking about this, I have two things. One is some things that we've done in the economics department to try to lower stress and anxiety among faculty members, in particular assistant professors. So I'll talk about the policies that we've instituted in our department that may be helpful to some other departments. And I talked to the two people who have been chair since me to see if they get their input on this as well. And then just a couple of things that have helped me in my career in dealing with stress. So as a department, we really focus on trying to reduce the anxiety levels of the assistant professors. That's kind of where we put our focus. And so we have, which means that the faculty with CFS, in particular the full professors, have to buy into this because they take on a pretty heavy load with regard to particular citizenship and flexibility in what they teach. So a few of the things that we've done to try to help assistant professors in our department is to reduce the teaching preps. So in our department, they have one prep through the third year review and then one more through CFS, so they can focus on getting really good at those courses and hopefully free up some time to work on their research. We have minimal citizenship responsibilities for assistant professors. Everybody who gets hired in our department for citizenship assignment is the chair of the social committee, which means agreeing with whatever the office manager decides we're going to do for the two parties that we have over the course of the year. Another thing that we started doing that seems to be helpful is the year before somebody comes up for CFS, they have a reduced teaching load so they can make a final push on their research. And when I was chair, there were a few instances where candidates had a negative CFS review at the department level, and that was really very anxiety provoking for the other assistant professors. And so what I did is I got all the assistant professors together and got a bunch of cinnamon rolls, and we talked. And because they saw things differently than maybe than the people with CFS, and so try to help and reduce anxiety by just talking about what happened and the outcome that occurred the way it did. Then also we prioritize travel funds for assistant professors because networking is so important early in the career. Also try to accommodate teaching schedules to meet faculty family obligations. So childcare responsibilities, for example. And so when we do our course scheduling, we try to take that into account. So those are some of the policies that we do in our department that are designed to try to reduce anxiety and stress, particularly among the assistant professors. One other thing, when I was chair, I was also a bishop of a YSA ward where Ben Ogles was the state president. And one thing that we did that as part of that calling is all the bishops in the state presidency put together a list of therapists in Utah County that we had some experience with. And I actually ended up sharing that with several of my faculty members for themselves or a spouse or one of their children. And so that actually ended up being a good resource to help faculty who needed some professional counseling. Okay, and then on a personal basis, one thing as I think back over my career that has been extremely helpful is just developing relationships with other faculty. And so that, one of those is peers. So kind of the cohort of people that were hired at the same time as me in the early 90s. Those relationships have been very helpful as we've tried to navigate our careers, and especially in the early years, to have somebody you can talk to, confide in and express your concerns and so on. Also, if you're an assistant professor, to have develop a relationship with a senior faculty member who can be a mentor. Another thing that helped me a lot is I had relationships with faculty from other departments. And that helped provide a perspective because not all departments do things the same way. And so it was useful to hear how they did things, or if I was complaining about something that my department was doing, there was somebody who could kind of understand and give me some advice. So developing relationships with people that you feel like you can talk to and confide in, I think is very helpful in managing stress and anxiety. And then Mona already mentioned this, but one thing that has been extremely helpful to me is to have something that you like to do outside of work, some kind of a hobby, and make it a priority. So for me, for many years, I was involved in a variety of endurance sports. And through that, I met other faculty members from other departments, and we traveled around the country competing in different events. And it was something that I had to look forward to, and it was a way to manage stress. Now, my wife and I really have been for several years been really involved in yoga, and that's been very helpful. And I've gotten into meditation and breath work and things like that. And so having something to look forward to outside of work and making it a priority, at least for me, has been extremely helpful in managing all of these stresses, especially as being a department chair.
That's right. Thanks, Eric. That's great. Sven, do you want to go next?
Sure. Eric and I were just talking, we were Econ 110 TAs together.
Some years ago.
Yes. And that was fun. Well, I thought Eric can open up this door to talk about what departments can do. As I thought about this, I said, man, I don't have anything in my own personal experience, either as just a faculty member or as a chair. I mean, you mentioned like having friends and hobbies. I don't have any friends or hobbies. So that's not very good. And I didn't, also as chair, I spent a lot of time thinking about how to support the faculty, but very little time kind of registering or, talking one-on-one with family then. And that goes to the kind of having no friends and hobbies thing. I mean, my approach as chair was to kind of try to give people all the resources I could come up with and then get out of the way. Mostly was my model, but so Eric mentioned had the econ model on teaching preps, and I know that some of you were rolling your eyes saying, "Oh yeah, like one prep, that wouldn't that be amazing?" We can't do that, and I think departments have different resources and different things, and not everyone can do that econ model. But I think you ought to learn from it, and the advantage of it. And so, publishing in top-ranked econ journals is a bear, and it takes a long time, right? And so it's you just need all the resources you can devoted to that. And before I was chair, I was a year on the college ranking status committee, which I am now, and some of the number of teaching preps coming through was just horrific. Really, and so departments need to manage this, and so I took on when I started in 2014 is kind of one of the main things I wanted to do was to get rid of this norm that there's like supposed to be 4, 5, 6 teaching preps in your portfolio, especially by the third year review, which just seemed to be really wasteful when there's other ways to do it. And so we have a very diverse department. We have about a dozen people trained in American politics, and we have an intro to American politics class. And the norm was kind of like, well, everyone needs to take a turn in doing that. And I'm like, well, that's the stupidest thing ever. How many people do we need in that rotation? I don't know whether it's 3, 4, but it ain't 12 or anything approaching 12, right? And so there's advantages to students as well for this, by getting faculty that get some practice. So getting down that number of preps as kind of a major department priority gives the faculty member more time, lets them focus, let them get better at teaching those preps that they are doing, rather than taking on kind of new ones. And I think I look back and think we're pretty successful in changing both the policies and the norms about what people were expected to teach. And I think that's really important because, and as I thought who was going to be here at this thing, I was thinking it was going to be more kind of younger faculty, and y'all look a little older than that, many of you, so I might be misjudging. But so maybe this is the right audience to kind of talk about to department leaders about really being careful of managing those teaching preps and citizenship assignments. And sometimes you have to remind junior faculty members that they really got to be careful with the kind of number of good things that they're doing. And we see this on the college RNS and on this this year, where we're having some amazing junior faculty, and we don't want to say, don't do all that stuff, but we're really worried about kind of burning out and taking things away. And let me just conclude with one thought. As you're kind of building a career before you have tenure in particular, if you think about this as like an engineer building a bridge. And what's the loss associated with overbuilding the bridge? Well, you spend more money than you would have needed to. If you underbuild the bridge, then you have a disaster, right? And so this would lead the very rational response would be to overbuild. You need to overbuild because the costs of not getting it strong enough are catastrophic. But I think we probably still have too much overbuilding. We could maybe, and I think that my message to people who are still in the CFS process is that I've seen a lot of files over the years, and the committees in our departments and colleges, they're just not out to get people. They're looking for reasons for why this candidate is making a contribution, not looking for all the little. Now, some of the negative things might be in the file. They might get mentioned, but they're not the overwhelming concern. what we're really concerned about is, we're looking for reasons to give people CFS. And more than that, I think all our departments in our college are really devoted to giving resources.
Hi, my name is Michaela and I'm a very anxious person. And so I hope that I can talk a little bit about the individual level, but also the institutional a little bit. One thing that I was thinking about was how much you would hate it if I used a certain word. So stick with me for a minute while I use this word, the M word. I think a huge key for this is mindfulness, but I mean it in a really specific way. The faculty mindfulness seminar is actually really good. I recommend it, meditate, etc. But when I think of mindfulness in this sense, it's being able to wrench ourselves out of the feeling of the moment of anxiety and apply your great big brains that I know you all have to a key question, which I think has 3 answers, or maybe it's 3 questions. Is the anxiety lying to me right now? Is the anxiety telling me something true but unimportant? Or is the anxiety telling me something true and important? And I think how you deal with that is going to depend on what the answer to those questions is. So as an example of the first, and I am not exaggerating for effect, when I was going up for CFS, I would lie awake at night thinking, if I don't get CFS, I will be homeless. And I'm not kidding. And with a little bit of distance from that, I think I can look back and say, I think my anxiety was lying. I think I was actually intolerable in a number of fields and would not have been literally homeless. But I was thinking of things like, do those foil blankets keep you warm in their bridge? I've been there, done that. And that kind of anxiety is not helpful. I appreciated Mona saying maybe we should embrace some of our anxiety. I think the kind you don't want to embrace is the kind that is lying to you. It may be useful to talk to a professional to help you sift through, is this a lie or is this true? If that's not something that comes naturally to you, or even to sift through the proportion that's lying. It turns out I've got great family reasons, genetic reasons to know that a large proportion of my anxiety is lying to me. And things like talking to a therapist and taking medication have helped with that. So maybe we're talking to a professional to figure out where you fall on that spectrum. And for some of us, that could be seeing a therapist forever. For some of us, it could be a handful of sessions to go, yeah, I figured out most of my anxiety isn't lying, so I got to figure out these other 2 questions, and I can do that mostly on my own. Is your anxiety lying or telling you the truth, but about something that's not important? Oh, I'm anxious to get this tiny thing done. Yeah, you said you would do it, but it doesn't actually matter that much. And you could probably write back to someone and say, sorry, I'm not doing it anymore, and it's just not important. And being able to admit that, to prioritize things and let go of things that are not important. And then to dig into when your anxiety is telling you something true and important. And being able to figure out, are those things where I should be leaning into it? Are those things where I need to be talking to someone else about resources that can help me manage those important things? Are those things where I should be talking to someone else about structural problems that are causing my anxiety? And I want to talk about structure and institutional stuff in a second. Is that something where I should be talking to someone about how to clear my plate? I might need some help with that because all of these things seem important, but I can't do it. My anxiety is telling me something important, and that's that I'm not okay and that I've got too much on my plate. And so you may need to talk to other people about what needs to come off that plate, even though they all look like they're important, to take care of the most important thing, which is your ability to go on and do the next thing. And the day after that, and the day after that. I think we've gotten great advice from both the structural and an individual level from the other amazing panelists here. Talking to other people, having friends is important, having friends in your unit, having friends outside your unit. But if you need to talk to other people as well, I think it can be hard sometimes to get past the idea of, I must be the only one feeling this way. let me assure you, you're not the only one feeling this way. But even if no one else is, I am. So come talk to me. Maybe you just need to talk about it. I find that quite a bit. And honestly, you're way more interesting to talk to than a lot of the other stuff I'm doing during the day. Can't do that. But I think you can probably talk to other, the leadership of your department. People more advanced than you if you're still thinking about CFS or full or things like that. But one thing that I want to assure you, but also want your help on, is that we are trying to think about this from an institutional direction too. I know the college has been talking about how do we deal with addition and subtraction. So there are some things that we'd like to invite people to do. And I know that part of the response to that will be with what time. And so, well, then we have to think about what to tell you not to do, so that you have room to do those things. I don't know that we've come to those answers yet. It's probably because we need your input. So please do be thinking about that. What are structural things that need to change, and especially that can be changed at the college? Because we're willing. We're talking about that ourselves right now. That's something we're actually interested in doing. I can give you an example of an institutional change that I think is actually important, and I hope you'll come with me in thinking that it's important. You know that we have a new rank and status policy. For the most part, if you're familiar with the old one, I think you'll find that the substance of it is not that different. It's shorter, the procedures are different, and we'll be talking about all of those, but the actual substance, like what you're judged on, is not that different. I do think there's one really, really huge important change that might go unnoticed because in terms of text, it's and that's that words like exceeds are gone. Everything is meets expectations. Satisfactory progress. I follow gymnastics. This is related. And one of the things they talk about, like when someone does a leap on the balance beam, they have to get 180 degrees, a straight line of their legs. But oftentimes they have to hyperextend so that it looks in that blink of an eye like it's 180 degrees. That's the easiest way to get the 180 degrees credit is to go beyond it. That's kind of the overbuilding. That's not what the policy says. The policy says meets expectations. It didn't used to. It used to say meets or exceeds. Satisfactory or exceptional progress. It doesn't mean that. So I think the institution, even the university that we'd like to pick at for not listening to us, me as well. But certainly the college is interested in trying to figure what are some of the institutional things that we can shift to try to lower anxiety as well. You heard some good examples today or some good ideas of things departments can do. Please do talk to us as well about it.
One thing I think we should all be looking for in our departments is that, so in the past 10 years, we've just been flooded with student weight. At every level. So finding money to do something like pay faculty, that's like impossible. Finding money to pay students is like the easiest thing in the world for a department. At least in my experience. And so I think anytime a faculty member is doing something that a student could do just as well is a horrible waste of resources. Now, Mona can grade her papers better than the student, so that's not a waste of resources. But if there are these things that you are doing or people are doing that a student can do, then for goodness sakes, let's hire a student, whether it's a TA or as an RA or other kind of administrative aid to do those kind of things. And so I would love to see that in the college. Is that faculty do what only faculty can do.
And that's a double good. It should, I hope, take some things off of your plate, but you will, without even trying to, be mentoring. Talk to that student, know their name and have a connection with them. I think we get very hung up on what has sometimes been called the gold standard of, well, did you publish with that student? Maybe not, and please do publish with some students, but there are other kinds of mentoring, and so you can turn those kinds of opportunities both into mentoring that is for your good and the students' good, but also into putting your priorities where they should be.
So now we're gonna open up for questions. We'll start right over here.
So I was talking to a friend yesterday and realized like I haven't ever actually taken a break. And I don't know how to do that. And I feel like especially pre-CFS, it feels very dangerous to put an away message that says, for the month of July, I'll be checking email periodically, and to actually like truly disengage. And yet I feel like I'm reaching a point where if I can't, it's like unplug a little bit, that I'm going to like explode. So I guess I'm wondering how can we do that? How can we remember how to have fun and to actually like take full breaks that allow us to recharge and replenish and be prepared to fulfill the responsibilities without it leading directly to those thoughts about whether reflective being looked at the form under the bridge when we're homeless get tenure.
How did you decide to go to?
That's easy for me. If I'm here, I am working. You know, if I'm at home, I got 10 minutes, I was working on my presentation for the meeting I'm going to tomorrow, you know, and so if I've got anything, if I'm home or if I'm here, I'm working. But if I travel and it's often with meetings, I try to find time, maybe a day or two after the meeting or before the meeting, sometimes an afternoon during the meeting to just go do something. And I can turn it off when I'm not at home. But when I'm home, it's harder for me to turn off. Although more recently I picked up quilting and that's very soothing. And so the mathematics and the design of that is really a lot of fun. So having something that you like that you can do in smaller pieces maybe, because for me, I think a month would be hard for me to want to get back into the research, but I can do 2 weeks really easily. So maybe do 2 weeks in June and a week in August or something like that to break it up. But I think it really depends on if you can do it for a month and then get back right in, then do it for a month and get back right in. But I can't do that. That's not my makeup.
I think there are a couple of things to think about. One might be creating some accountability for this. In my annual interview with the dean this year, part of our discussion was that she has assigned me to go somewhere this summer. And I'm supposed to report to her where I go and what I don't do. And I'm not sure that's a bad idea if you're struggling with that kind of thing, in part because it will also have you, if you want to make it your chair, then they're the ones who can say to you, I really think you're fine. As someone who's going to be judging you, I really think you're fine and should take a couple of minutes, please do. So that maybe building some accountability into it. One of the things that's hard for me, and I don't know if this is an LDS burn on my soul, but kind of that whole, if the shark isn't swimming, it's drowning feeling. If I'm not moving toward perfection, I'm sinning. But the scriptural stories we have of Christ, he takes naps. Literally. He hangs out and eats dinner. And B, I don't think that I am always honest with myself about the quality of work I do if I'm pounding every single day on it. And so taking, even if it is just a week away, and then coming back and going, oh, what was this garbage I was writing before I left when I was squirming in my chair and unable to focus because I was burned out. So being really honest about the quality of work before and after the break.
Anyone else, any questions? I have one. We talked a lot about, well, a little bit about associate professors, but what do you say for associate professors that in terms of balancing, being motivated to go for full versus like, oh, okay, I can take less, have less stress here. What would you say or recommend for those that are in that middle ground?
I can say something on that. When I was hired in 1993, the economics department hadn't hired a cohort about the time I was hired in the early 90s. Was the first that the econ department had hired right out of graduate school in many years. They had been instead hiring either people who had tenure at other universities or were assistant professors at another university, and they'd been out 3 or 4 years and were doing very well. And so they weren't, for my cohort, they weren't really sure, especially at the associate professor level, they hadn't dealt with it for a while, and so there were no communicated expectations. And I think I'd been an associate professor, and also, this also carried on to, I don't want to tell too much dirt about the econ department, but when they hired all these assistant professors, they weren't sure what the standards were going to be, and there were several people that didn't get CFS, and it was really grim time. But then so those who did get CFS were kind of traumatized by that, and we're thinking, I'm not going to go for associate professor until it's absolutely certain that I'm going to make it, because it was so traumatic at the CFS level. But there were no expectations, like no one, I think I'd been associate professor for like 5 years before a chair in my stewardship interview even mentioned anything. And it was just like, so are you thinking about full professor? But I didn't have any idea what the expectations were of the department. And so we had this mix of the people who were associate professors didn't want to go up for full, because it was, I don't know, it'd been so hard getting through CFS, we didn't want to go through that again. But we also didn't know where the bar was. And so eventually Dean Magleby told me and another colleague that we had to go up for full. So, and now I know why. It's because they needed a chair and they wanted someone who was a full professor. But anyway, so I was an associate professor for like 10 years, and I could have been full, before that, but I just didn't want to do it. And so when I became the chair, when somebody had a successful CFS review, I said, take about a month and enjoy this, and I'm going to talk to you about expectations for full professor. And so if you're an associate professor and it's unclear what you're working towards, then I would highly recommend talking to the department chair and getting some clarity on that, because it's very easy to lose momentum. And so we set kind of some pretty clear parameters about the transition from in the department from associate to full. And as soon as people became an associate professor, we started pushing them to set goals for coming up in 6 years or whatever. And so just make sure that you have clear expectations about what you're trying to accomplish.
Just to add to that, that it doesn't have to be the chair that does this. Other senior faculty should be looking at their colleagues and saying, hey, you're ready to go up for full professor, you should go up for full professor. And I've done that, and I've had some people say, no, I'm not going to do it for all the reasons you're talking about. And I said, no, you're going to do it. And I'm going to mentor you, and I'm going to review your portfolio, and we're going to talk about this. And every, whatever it is that's happening in your life, you come talk to me, we'll work through it. And so you can set up that within your department, that this is something that we're here for you, we can help you. Don't think that you have to do this alone. I can review things, I can give you advice, I can tell you who you should go talk to. And so I think doing that in particular, and I've done it in particular for female colleagues, trying to get more full professors as female colleagues, but any faculty that's a full professor should be talking to the associate level professor faculty and saying, hey, why aren't you doing this? You're ready.
I would just say quickly that I don't think, because it is so stressful to go through that CFS process. And it's just so many years of that weighing over you. And if you decide that you don't want to live like that anymore, that's okay, right? There's room for, if you want it, and I would say, a lot of people do, and it's great if you want to, come up in 5 years, but if you say, no, I have you know, if I make it there, that's great. If I don't, I'm just not gonna live like that anymore, because I mean, the last thing you want, right, is an associate professor with the kind of stress that is.
Or I guess the opposite direction, that was the reason for me to go out, was to make it all end. That was the last time. No kidding, one of my biggest motivations was I'll never have to read my student evaluations. So, a short amount of stress to take another stress off my plate every semester.
But they're making all the things that they have to do for stewardship, and they're getting through year to year. You may as well go up, because if you're successful every year and you're satisfactory every year, you should be ready, you know, in 5 or 6 years to go up for full professor. So to me, you're already having to meet the standard. So why not jump through one more hoop and get the raise and the other things that come through with being a full professor, the weight being gone, I don't have to ever think about this again being gone.
Is there any points out that requires departments to give some guidance on what it means to be a full professor, so you know what you're shooting for? So I really do encourage that.
Like in psych's department, stewardship and drinking status policy, it says what those things are.
I had a faculty member tell me the other day that I don't want to go for full, because then that just means you get stuck with administrative assignment.
There is that. There is that.
Not your anxiety line.
Do you have something, Joyce?
Yeah, I just want to comment on that, and I think that I speak for a lot of the people at the status of associate professor of like, I mean, exactly like what Sven said, why would I want to do that again? You know, why, I'm content. I don't need that stress in my life. And so one fall, Sam came to me and said, Dean Oakland wants you to go up for full. And I said, no, I don't care about status. I don't care about that. I don't want that stress in my life. So no, we just really feel like you're ready to go up. And I said, no, no. And so a year later, he came again. And I thought, okay, the thing that made the difference, because I'm like Michaela, high anxiety about things like that. Sam made me feel like I really was ready, that I really would have the support to make it through the system, that it really was a good process for me. And to be honest, I really had never even considered it. I just knew I didn't want to stress again. And so for those of you that are working with associate professors, boy, that made all the difference for me, was his confidence that I was ready and that I had something to offer that I could offer in a better way as full professor. And so I really encourage you, that mentoring, whether it's from a department chair, from one of the dean's office, from other faculty, but where that mentoring helps relieve that anxiety. So thank you.
You're welcome.
I am actually the product of what Mona is talking about. If Mona doesn't really push me, I've never even thought about it. It's not because, being full will be really, really stressful, but rather I just didn't have so much confidence in me. And I feel like I'm not good enough. And all of those kind of, I shouldn't say this, but a lot of female faculty tend to think about. But I am so glad that she pushed me. And I feel like, I don't need to read anymore. Grades might be not that good as much as I thought, to tell the truth, but still, I'm so glad that it's really make me feel more confident what I'm doing, and this kind of feeling of achievement. I did have really horrible experience. I'm sorry to make you really stressed out, but I have horrible CFS projects, and it was really, really difficult for me. But still, I thought it was worthwhile. So thank you for putting.
One more question, Dylan.
Yeah, what I'm recognizing is that everyone has these terrible experiences, or at least everyone who's willing to say anything about CFS. And I've started telling people years ago that I wouldn't be a professor again because of what that was like. And so I mean, I can't imagine an institutional environment that didn't have problems that individuals had to face and try to deal with personally with stress and problems and so on, but it just seems like the process here has just made so many people so unhappy. And why? And I don't understand why. And is there no solution, whether it's institutional or interpersonal, or maybe, I don't know, maybe the current CFS people don't feel like, I mean, when I was an assistant, I would see help wanted signs on the way to work. I make a living working at UPS.
Or do I need to put a blanket?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't ready to you know, to blanket myself under the overpass, but I thought at least I could deliver pizza, you know.
Don't read science Twitter, Lance.
In perspectives, given that you could give to the college level, from a couple of different lenses. So one would be, I think there's some mythologies around that everybody knows of a case. Usually those were a while ago, honestly. So I think we've tried hard to improve. We had 100% hit rate this year. I think we had 100% hit rate last year. We were pretty successful. So do we have some, I don't want to say myths, there were true cases, but that are in the past that are still hanging over us? And how do we clear the air on that? So what are people who are in the process right now? How are you feeling? Do you still feel that darkness? And if so, from what source? And they're like, oh, I will tell you. But also if you have ideas, I mean, we're never going to get out of having to turn in a portfolio, but what are some things that we could?
So I was just kind of tongue in cheek telling Lance to not read science Twitter, but I think our institution compared to others, if you look to see what's happening in other places, like I kind of think, I don't know, I think this institution provide another perspective has been a bit more, or maybe a lot more supportive than other places where people are clawing for tenure and clawing for advancement. Like I just recently read that the Yale School of Management prides themselves on hiring more tenured professors than growing up and giving the ones that start out as assistant associate a tenure track position. So it's like very, very cutthroat at other places. And I think every institution has to sort out their own dirty laundry, right? But I think Michaela's right. Some of this is, I think, changing. I think there's just a groundswell of recently of just a different mindset, a different attitude, and that with a lot of deep breathing and
But part of that
beverages, you know,
it's hard not to feel like the institution appreciates that and maybe even desires that, because why couldn't they change that? Or do they even know how people feel? They even know that people need recommendations about healthcare, mental health care providers.
maybe it's communication. Maybe there's just, it needs to be, and maybe we need to agitate for it, so to speak, and just kind of say, hey, you know, let's kind of increase communication lines or create more of an, you know, understanding or expectation. I mean, there's probably lots of places that could go.
But, and we just had a visit with the president, and there were a number of things expressed and the AVP, and it was with econ, at least from our perspective, the feeling was that they didn't care what we said. They didn't listen to what we said. So it's hard not to come to this conclusion that they don't care, that they're happy with this perception that this is a cutthroat thing, and if you aren't on the top of your game, you're out of here.
Razvan did say that comfortable place was between the teaching and research expectations a couple of years ago, right? Where he's like, you know,
I miss
Jim.
Jim.
You know, you have to do top-notch research and top-notch teaching, and that rub, you know, is painful, but that's kind of like, he said it was like, that's the sweet spot. And I'm just like, well, that's.
Yeah, so
Last comment.
So I think some of the institutional darkness that was over the college has shifted, right? So that shifted.
department leadership still matters. So I had a horrible experience, even though I had my book in my hand at my third year review at my college meeting. I still like cried for 24 hours and wanted to like leave as fast as possible. But then because we had a different kind of environment on the college level with a new dean, but then because of department leadership, when I went up for CFS, it was also a nightmare. And now we're still dealing with kind of the higher level darkness where as an institution. And so that makes kind of everything we do feel heavy and hard and like and just insecure. So, and I don't know that there's anything at the college that we can do to change that.
I will say, I think it matters who's on the department rank and status committee. That group and the dynamics in that group make a huge difference. It matters who's in your department leadership meeting, you know, in your leadership, who's your chair. If you have associate chairs, who are those people? How do they view this? And so we've had some missteps it's been a while in psychology with people on the rank and status committee. And so those people need to be very carefully selected so that they're there to do equitable and fair reviews and be supportive of faculty going through, as opposed to this idea that we're going to find something wrong with you. That's not how it should be. I do think this new change will help, because in the time that I've been here, in the 20+ years, the size of the rank and status files have gone from something reasonable to a book that you don't get any credit for publishing. So I think you're right on. I think it does matter. And I was just at the mentoring session when Shane Reese talked, and he was talking about that there's, you know, the scholarship and teaching aren't two things, you know, you need them both, and it's a false dichotomy if you think about them separately. And so there is still some things out there, but the people in leadership within your departments matter. And in the new policy, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, I will tell you I could be wrong, that more of the work will come down to the department and the college, and if they pass you, it doesn't even go to the university. Is that correct? Sort of.
So they're gonna get sampling
For a while.
for a while, at least at that level. But I mean, there's also things happening, like we can't hire adjuncts or CFS faculty who our department decides that we want to hire. So that's going to affect what we're teaching and kind of course loads, and like whether we can do some of the reshuffle
For all those hiring positions is really daunting and slowing down what we can do.
Thank you, everyone. Let's get our panel.
Super inspiring. I think listening to a live and then assuming no one else will understand it is where unhealthy things happen.
Come talk to us. I'm happy to talk to anybody. Would love to help anybody I can, or listen to anybody that needs listening to,
So we have snacks over this side on the way out again, and our next session breakout